Okay, let's get started with the introduction of structured query language, pronounced as SQL or SQL. It's a standard language we use to define manipulate data in a relational database. You can interact with data in the database interactively or through a host language such as C, Java, Python, embedded in the host language to interact with the database. And SQL work on a set of record, which is stored in table. And instead of working on individual record from a SQL language viewpoint, and when you use SQL, you only need to know the name of the database, the table, the column in the database, and you don't really need to worry about the physical data structure, such as pointer in the database. And we divide the SQL statements into several categories, including data definition language, data manipulation language, and the data control language. And the data definition language defines the structure or schema of a database in terms of table, what are the columns in the table, any constraint or data integrity principle in the database table, such as certain column cannot be null, which means you need to give me a value and what's the default value, etc. And you can certainly modify the schema. And data manipulation language is our main focus, including retrieving data through SQL select statement, which is what we're going to focus on mostly in here. And you can also insert and update, delete existing row or table, row or record in a table. And there's something called data control language, which you can assign access privilege to the data in your database and control how user should have access to the data, and what we call concurrency control. And this infographic kind of show almost everything about SQL that you need to learn. We're focusing on pretty much the SQL select statement. Here they use the term called DQL. I don't use that term, but basically this is a SQL select statement. Come back and refer to this, and this is read-only. We're just retrieving data from the database. And we'll certainly talk about this down the road in great detail. And the other three statements for data management language is insert, update, and delete. We also going to touch a little bit in terms of how we define particular a table, specify the column that's in a table. And each of the column has certain data type. And this is just an example of possible data type. And you can also define view, which is a saved query or select statement, which we'll briefly discuss it. Index allow you to index certain column of a table to speed up your retrieval process. So you can create table, column, you can drop it, you can update it, and you can rename it, etc. Once again, this part is not the primary focus. The primary focus for this course in the database is actually on the data manipulation language, in particular the SQL select statement over here. There's some references regarding the SQL server. MySQL server is the one we use, and then MySQL Workbench is the tool that we use a kind of more user-friendly tool that we use to manage the underlying database and actually to use the underlying data stored in MySQL Server. There's quite a bit of tutorial that you can study if you really want to know MySQL Server and MySQL Workbench well. To set you up, this slide contains all the information, and there's MySQL Server and MySQL Workbench are open source, which means it's free. Depends on when using. They work on Windows environments and a Mac. So if you're a Windows user, then follow this tutorial, short tutorial, to install MySQL Server and MySQL Workbench. If you are a Mac user, then follow this. I believe it's a Windows user. When you actually install MySQL Workbench, and then MySQL Server will be installed in the first place for you. On the Mac, you have to install MySQL Server first, and then MySQL Server Workbench. And by the way, when you install MySQL Server, you actually need to remember the root user's username and password. Okay. Because you need this whenever you actually start the MySQL Workbench, they will ask you for password of the administrator's password, which is the root kind of user. The two tutorials came from an instructor who offered a course on advanced SQL query course through two platforms. Marvin. This may be free, so you can give it a try. Udemy, you may need to pay, so just optional. And in a textbook, it provides two documents to install Windows version of MySQL Server and MySQL Workbench. It's listed over here as Appendix A and B. I also provided a document that kind of step-by-step guide for you to install MySQL Server and Workbench for either Windows or Mac. Okay, so get this done so you're ready to go. And also, there are some SQL script that has been provided to you. This class MySQL.SQL file is the one that the database we use mostly in this slide deck for teaching purpose. Northwind database is the one for our kind of homework assignment. So eventually you need this too. This one is actually the data model, which you don't really need to download it, but it gives you the data model so you can look at the Northwind database and also the class database, how the structure of it in a more visual way. The two appendix in the previous slide came from Murak, MySQL book, and this is their website. They do offer a free chapter, and then also there's a database creation SQL script that create a sample database that work with this free chapter that you can study and learn. And if you really want to know MySQL this is a book that I recommended. It's very easy to follow. But let me just download the document. Hold on a second. Okay, let me come down here. And let's see when you're this is the link. You can just click on it. It actually show up in my browsers as a script file, and then you can just click download to actually download it. Okay, I'm going to put it in the download folder, my download folder. I already have it. I already also have the Northwind startup. Okay, so that has been downloaded previously. So I'm not going to repeat that. And why don't I just get this one as well? This one is class, hold on a second. This one is, I hit the control key, click on it, and I'm going to say download. Okay, they cannot show in the browser, so because it's a special file type, so I'm going to put it in the download. Actually, I do have a version, but let me just download it again. So I have all three files. Let me just download this just for the sake of it. So let me just click on it and then download this version, this kind of account payable database creation script. Okay, so I got all those files downloaded in my download folder. So let's come back and we'll use it later on. So now it's time to bring up my SQL Workbench. I'm going to show you how to, through hands-on instead of following the slide. The slide kind of give you play-by-play screenshot to some extent. I'm going to switch back to my okay, I'm using window. I'm going to say MySQL Workbench. I just type MySQL and then they find it. So this is the one. I'll just double click. Okay, now we have MySQL Workbench up and running. You have to kind of log into your MySQL server in this root, and this is the one that I'm using. So you will see something similar to this. You just click on it, and this is the root user's or administrator's password. When you install the MySQL server, you have to write it down. So I'm going to just enter mine. So I'm in my MySQL Workbench. There's a MySQL server up and running. Usually when you install a MySQL server, every time you start up your computer, they will bring up the MySQL server database. So you're ready to go. But interacting with the database and database server, MySQL Workbench is the tool for MySQL server. Okay, so let me clean up a few things before we get started, because this is something that I've been working on. Okay, and so let's look at the environment just a little bit. If that's the first time you're using it, we have administration. I don't usually look at this much. The important thing is the schema. If you're using Mac, this 2 tab is on the top instead of at the bottom here. And I actually have the app account payable database running install. Let me just get rid of it. Drop the schema. Drop means delete for table or even database. I have a Northwind database. We're not going to use the Northwind database except in the assignment. I do have the class database. Let me just make sure you highlight it, and then I'm going to drop it so we can start from scratch. Okay, so now let's start with the class database. On the top here in the toolbar, there's kind of open folder, the second icon here. You just say, okay, I'm going to open a SQL script. Okay. So this is the class underscore MySQL.SQL script. That's the script. Double click on it, or highlight and open. So now I open the script. Okay. The script, just very briefly, 2- just means comment. It doesn't do anything, just internal documentation. You create a database. You use and call it class database. You use class, which means you set as a default database. So when the following SQL statement that when you apply those statements, they apply to this particular database. And you may notice that at the end of each statement, I have semicolon to end it. Okay, this is like creating a new table. This is dropping the table. If it exists, drop it and create a new one. And just look a little bit, and then we can populate. We also populate the table we just created with some data with insert statement. The detail is not important, but eventually you're going to learn how to write those create statement, insert statement. But altogether, those are the statements to create a database for you, and in this case, also populate some sample data in the newly created database. So to run this, you move your cursor maybe somewhere, don't highlight anything, just maybe click here, and then execute this lightning bolt icon, the third icon here. Okay, and just run it. Then you're going to execute all the statement in this SQL script. Okay, and that's the output, which means that they're all green. There's some warning, but no arrow. So the database has been created. It's supposed to show up here, but you're not seeing it, and that's because we need to refresh the schema or databases here in this panel. So let me just click on it. Now I got the class database. Okay, it's in boldface, which means this is the default database now. So let's study the database just a little bit. There are tables. If you click this little triangle, I can expand it or shrink it. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6 tables. If you want to study a table, you can click again. Then we see a table can have column, index, foreign key, trigger. Okay, and if you click on the column, then you can see actually all the column in a table. In principle, when you have to use a database and retrieve data from it or use it in some way, you need to understand what are the table, what are the columns in each of table, how are those tables related to each other. And another way to study the table is come here and highlight the table, then you see this range that if you click on it, this give you, let me adjust this a little bit. This is how you define those columns. Its data type, which column or columns are used as a primary key. NN means not null, which means you have to assign a value to this column when you create a new row. This abbreviation are kind of explained over here. Okay, so for instance, UQ, which means, let's see, we have primary key, we have like unique, UQ means unique, okay, and then B is binary, so it's kind of mapping to this abbreviation, okay, and you can study a little bit. And so that's the metadata, the structure of a table, which is a list of columns which has specific data type, and then some additional specification about the column. Okay, when there is a primary key, when there's not null, when there it has to be unique, etc. Okay. So another thing when you study a table is look at the actual data. Okay, that's the third icon here. Once again, move your cursor over and select this third table data icon. Then we can actually review or retrieve all the rows from this table, which is basically a select statement. Select everything, all the column from this table. Okay. You don't really need the class dot prefix because class is now a default database that we highlighted, and then in boldface, so system would know you're working against this class database. And if you only want certain column, for instance, if you only want title, you can just say title instead of all the column. To run it, you can click this one, you will run it. This say execute the statement under keyboard cursor. I'll click this one, I will get this result. Okay. If I'm here, okay, supposedly you may not be able to run this because your cursor wasn't kind of in this particular statement. Okay, so just be very careful. If you have multiple statements, then you probably want to use this. If you have an only single statement, then these two are more or less the same. Okay, so that's how we kind of load the database and then review its structure, understand its schema, the table in it, column in the table, and then we can kind of review quickly the data in each of the table to understand it even better. And now we're ready to actually write SQL statement, particular select statement, to retrieve data from it. Okay, from any of the existing table. So let's go back to the slide deck to kind of continue our lecture. I pretty much went over most of it. This is how you log in with your kind of root user password. This is the interface of the workbench. Okay, we're using this so-called SQL editor quite a bit. Okay, and the two lightning bolt here. And this is this portion is output, which kind of show you the effect of execution of any of the SQL statement. If it's a select statement, after you run it, they will return the result, show you the result. That's kind of the result set display in result grid. Okay, usually we just look at the grid here. Okay, there's some additional help in terms of the syntax. And this is a Spring snapshot. Okay, this kind of explain the icon. The first one is not that critical. We use the range for metadata, and we use this. The third icon is actually the table data, to actually view the table data. Okay, so, and this just show you how you you can create a new SQL script. You can load existing one through the second icon, and they will work against any particular default database. So you may need to set existing schema or database as a default database. And that's where you will write your program or run your program. Okay. If you want to create a brand new database, and then you would go to the SQL Workbench, just click anywhere. Let's see, you click maybe somewhere empty, you say create schema. That's where you'll create a database. So you can just say, I want to create database, let's say test. So, okay, I think I have the test already. So I'm going to say test one. And they're actually showing you the SQL statement to create this new database. Just create schema test one. Apply. Finish. So it's done. In this case, I don't have to refresh. Somehow it show up. If you click, there's a table, view, whatever. If you double click table, there's no table because it's a brand new database. There's nothing in it. Let me close this one. So you can click right mouse button here and say create table. Okay. Let me just create something very simple. Let's assume we have a table, we call it vendor. Now you can say, okay, I have a vendor ID. Oh, they're pretty good. They know that's vendor ID. We'll set that as a primary key. And you click here. Now you can have vendor vendor name. Okay. Some people use the convention, use lowercase for the column name. Okay. And so, but it's totally up to you. And vendor name, you can say, oh, it's not null. If you want, you can say it's not null. So we're pretty much create a very simple vendor table with two columns, vendor ID and vendor name. So I'm going to, this is not done. You have to say apply to actually create this create SQL statement to actually create the table. So you say apply, they will show you the SQL statement. Okay, create in the test one database the vendor table with vendor ID, which is integer, not null, and vendor name, which is varchar, which is variable character, 45 character. It's also not null, and the primary key is vendor ID. So it's pretty readable. Okay, but the tool over here is a visual way for you to create it. Okay, and if you know the SQL create statement, you can certainly review it and feel comfortable with it, and you apply. Once and finish. Once you're done, and we can close this. Once you're done, you notice that now I do have a table. You can go back to the table definition tool, which is what we just used, to look at it. We can also look at the table data tool. basically we're running a SQL select statement, selecting all the columns from this table. Since there's nothing in there, so they only show us the column name. You can enter your data here, by the way. Since this is an integer, so I would say vendor 1. Vendor name is best supplier Inc. And that's another vendor. And I would just say that's ABC, let's say warehouse. Okay. So we create 2 rows or 2 records in this table, but it's not done yet. Once again, in MySQL Workbench, although they do provide some really easy to use tool here for us to create the table or create the data, but you still need to say apply. When you click apply, they generate, in this case, insert statement to insert into this test1 database vendors table the vendor ID, the vendor name column with the value of 1, which is best supply Inc. And then in another row, which is vendor number 2, which is ABC warehouse. So let me just make this. Okay, so that's good. Where you can scroll and see everything. You need to say apply, finish. So let me close this. Just make sure it's there. I'm going to come here and click the icon data table. Now I have this 2 vendors information listed. You can certainly say something like vendor. If you only want to see vendor number 1, you can say where vendor ID equal 1. Typo, that's error message. Okay. You can read this unknown vendor ID. They couldn't find it in the where clause, so that gives you a little bit hint what's going on. And then we run it again. Now we get just 1 row instead of all the row, which we only have 2. So that's how you create a brand new database, how to create a new table, and how you populate the table with data, and how you generate the SQL statement to execute the SQL statement based on what you have done, and eventually make changes to your database. So let's come back and quickly go over. So this pretty much, this I'm using the class database, but since we have existing class database, you can try another name, create a schema, and then set it as a default schema. And then and this is the step for loading the class MySQL database, which we demonstrated. And those are statements which is a little bit more advanced. Set the class database as a default database, show all of its table, describe the structure of the table, and then select and show all the columns from, let's say, the course table. Okay. You can run it one at a time, see what you get out of it. Okay. And just once again, the SQL editor, this is you open a SQL script file in the SQL script editor. Okay. And this is how we actually create our class database, by loading this statement, execute it, and you get it. This explains actually all the toolbar icon in the SQL query SQL script editors toolbar. Okay, and particularly the first 4. This is open an existing script file, and this is saving the one if you made some changes. This is execute the select portion of the script. If you highlight a portion of the script, then they will execute it, which can be one statement or multiple statement. And if you didn't highlight anything, then they execute everything in the script file. This execute the statement under the keyboard cursor. Okay, only one statement at a time. And this is the database model for our class database. And I think I have a better screen. Okay, so let's see whether I can load it up. I do have this downloaded earlier, so let me just show you that briefly. There's home icon or house icon. You click on it, and the second choices here is the model. Okay, I actually already have that loaded, but you can just say open and then find this model and load it up. Since I already have it, I'm going to just open it up from here. But in your case, open this up and find that the file for the model. Okay. So in this case, this is the class model, data model or database model. And this is the version for the Northwind database. This will be very helpful for you to study these two databases for the tutorial and for the assignment. Okay. Let me explain this model just a little bit since we're going to use it. Okay. This is a small training company. They offer various training courses through different divisions, thinking about department. And each division may have instructor working for that division. This is the relationship, which means a division may have many instructors. When you highlight the particular relationship, they're going to show you the matching column in the two tables that's related. Okay, in this case, the DID is the primary key for the division. And then the div over here is the foreign key, which serves as which is a foreign key in the structure table. Okay, and this is the relationship. Okay, play with it. This is a really nice feature. You not only know they're related, but you also know how are they related through primary key, foreign key pair. Okay. Very, very nice feature. So definitely play with it and understand the structure of your this particular database well. Another thing is this little symbol in this relationship line. The two little vertical bar or horizontal one, that means one and only one. This means one or many. Okay, that little triangle or cross foot symbol, as we call it, that means many. Okay, so for instance, a division, thinking about a single division, could have offer one or many courses. A division can have one or many instructors. But the reverse is each instructor only work for one and only one division. Same thing for course. A course is offered by one and only one division. That's how you read and describe the relationship. Okay. Let's look at the course and offering. This is the tricky part. What is offering? For instance, we can say, we offer a course called MIS 310. MIS 310 Introduction to MIS, that's just a course. But each semester, each term, or different period, we're offering different section of MIS 310. And that's the offering. So offering and the course are two different things. They're closely related. Okay. So if you want to know, let's say, just use MI310 example. That's MI310 is the course ID. Introduction to MIS is the course title. It's offered by the business department. And let's assume there's a fee, and let's assume it's $800 or something. And that information is stored here. The offering is for particular, let's say in spring 2026 semester, we offer 2 sections. Then you have 2 offerings. We may even have some historical offering from previous semester, which will be also here. So I have a course ID, so then I would know which course this is for, because that course ID allow me to come back to the course table to grab anything related to the course, like course title. I don't store course title in the offering here because that's here. As long as I have this foreign key, primary key pair in relationship, I can join these 2 tables and get anything that I want from this 2 tables. Okay, that in essence is the power of relational database and the power of primary key, foreign key to make that happen. And we do have an offering number, which we can differentiate one offering from another one. And then we have a starting date for the offering. We have where the location for the classroom, and then who's teaching it. That's the instructor's number. So if you look at here, the offering instructor number is a foreign key. Okay. But if you look at this relationship, this course ID is also a foreign key. This 2 together is actually primary key, course ID and offering number. Okay. Allow me to just complete this by actually talking about this registration. Registration is linking to 2 tables, student table and offering table. So what is registration? Student can take many offering. Okay. In typical, we say student can take many courses, but what we really mean, if we are very specific, say a student can have sign up for many sections of different courses. Okay. You probably shouldn't sign up for 2 sections of the same course. Okay. In the same semester. Okay. So student can enroll in many offering. An offering can have many students sign up for it. So if you're thinking about this 2 table, it's a many-to-many mapping. But we don't see a line connecting the 2 tables indicating the many-to-many situation, because in a well-designed database, we need to remove many-to-many relationship between 2 tables and create a bridge table, an associated table that in our particular case here, which is registration table, and then we end up with 2 one-to-many relationship. A student can have many registration. A course can be associated with many registration. And the registration is really the kind of cross-reference or intersection between the student and offering. So if you really look at it, we will know which course ID and offering number. Remember, these 2 together help us to identify the offering. And then who may be the student. Okay. Students sign up for this offering. And then when we assign the grade, we don't assign the grade to a student. We don't assign a grade into the student table. We don't assign a grade in the offering table. We assign the grade to the registration table. Then we know that grade is for that particular student, for that particular offering the student enrolled in. So we have a one-to-many relationship. Here we have a one-to-many relationship. And that is an associated table for us to handle the many-to-many relationship between offering and student. Once you really understand the structure of your database through this data model, which is an ER model, entity relationship model, when someone say, oh, can you help me to find the following information, you can pretty much look at the data model and kind of tell the person who made the request whether you can get the data for them, because the relationship is almost like the path for you to navigate, and the data model is almost like a navigation map. You can say, oh, you need something about the course title of all the course students sign up for. So I would, if you give me the student ID, I can find the student's registration. Through the registration, I can find out through the course ID, I can find out the course title. So then yeah, I can do that for you. Okay, so that's very, very powerful. So definitely, when you're giving a task to access data in your database, try to get a data model. Okay, and to understand the database. Data model is a good place to kind of get started. Okay. And earlier we talked about, for this class database, you can run this and then try to see how to see what you get, and then use class just set as a default. So we highlight the schema name. And this to show you a list of table. On this describe, it's a little bit more advanced, and this is the result of the describe course. And here I kind of explain what the notation mean. That means CID is a primary key. Okay, and div here they say MUL. MUL means that this column has a non-unique index. Okay, we create an index over it. Okay. And this is how we define a table, which we illustrated earlier. Okay, so we're not going to explain here. And this is how you can review the data in a table by selecting this data table icon. And by the way, in this data grid, result grid, you can also modify the data, but do remember to click apply to make the change permanent. Okay. So once again, a database consists of a list of table. Each table has a list of column. Column has column name. Each column has its data type and size. For instance, character. Varchar means variable character. How many of them? You usually would specify primary key. Sometimes you would specify foreign key, which is more advanced. And you could specify index, an index on a column that's frequently used as criteria in database search of that table. Then you may want to consider using index, which speed up the information retrieval but slow down insert, update, and delete. On the right-hand side is how you do in Access. We're not going to cover Access, but this is kind of a similar approach. Okay. And we explained the three icons, particularly the second, which is the table editor for metadata. And this table data icon is for you to review the data. You can do insert, update, delete in the result set if you want. But remember to apply. This is a syntax for create table. You can say create table in the table name. That's typically just enough. Okay. And then you have a list of columns you want to create, and you will specify its data type and specific column attribute, whether it's not null, unique, and when there's a default value, which means if you don't tell me what the value, I'm going to assume a default value. Auto increment is auto number, which means we automatically, usually it's for some primary key, you will automatically assign an integer like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 without user enter that information. That's called auto increment. Okay. So this is just an example for use that test1 database. We did this. Okay. If you have to write SQL, you create a table. That's the data type. Okay. Here, I did not specify primary key. You can do it, but it's better that you would specify the primary key, which is the vendor ID. Primary key is always not null. Primary key optionally can be auto increment, which means we can automatically assign a value. Usually that's integer. Okay. And when you're not telling me what's the vendor ID for new vendor, I'm going to just automatically assign a value to it. Okay. Name, here I request that's unique. Not only has to be not null, but it has to be unique. But this doesn't make this as a primary key because I specifically say the primary key is the vendor ID. Okay. This is just, I actually use the class database to create the vendor table, and then this is, in our previous demo, we pretty much did it. Okay. And this is the data model, and we just review, and so it's very helpful for you to understand the data model. And you can also insert data into table. In this example, based on the slide deck, we did set up vendor ID as auto increment. Let's see what's the effect. So here I'm inserting into the vendor table with vendor name for 2 vendor, but I did not specify the vendor ID. The system will automatically assign the vendor ID and increase the vendor ID by 1 when you need to create a new vendor. Okay, so that's the situation. You would put in your insert statement and say apply, and then you can find out through the SQL statement you can find out when the insert has been in effect. This just once again create table. We've done that before. This is how you define a table, the vendor table, and apply to make the change permanent. You can see the script, and you can even copy down the script. Okay. Let's look at how we define a foreign key. Okay. Let's look at a very simple example, because we tried to focus on what is a foreign key. And in this case, I actually have a SQL script that create a database for you to create a foreign key. But let's just look at here. I create a table, we call it parent, has an ID, which is a primary key. Okay, intentionally keep it very simple. Okay. I create another table, we call it child table, which also has its own ID, and also have another column, which is, we call it parent ID. This is a foreign key. It points back to the parent table here, where it serves as a primary key. Okay, and we can create an index of the parent ID, the foreign key. We can create index, and by the way, this is not necessary. This parent index is really just the name of the index we're creating. So it can be, you can name it differently. But we are creating index over this parent ID. Foreign key. Foreign key, watch carefully. We say the parent ID is a foreign key. Okay. Parent ID here is a foreign key. It is reference. Okay. It reference, if I draw an arrow, it reference the parent table primary key. Okay. So the parent ID is a foreign key pointing to the parent table where it serves as a primary key. And here we need to specifically point out the ID is the primary key, because there are situations you can pointing to a unique column in another table, okay, instead of the primary key. But most of the case, it's the primary key. So the two table here, a lot of time we refer as a primary key parent-child relationship between these two tables. Okay, a parent table, a child table. It has one-to-many relationship. Okay, a row in the parent table can have many rows corresponding to its primary key in the child table. Okay, it's one-to-many. Parent-child, one-to-many. And the child table has a foreign key pointing to the parent table where it serves as a primary key. And this part is how you define the foreign key, primary key relationship. Okay. We can also specify data integrity rules between this two table, parent-child table relationship. And here, just keep it simple. On delete cascade, what does that mean? If you delete a row in the parent table and all the row in the child table associated with that, the primary key of that row will be deleted. Okay. Let's say if a customer placed a number order, but now the customer no longer do any business with us, and then if we need to clean up the data, then we delete that customer, and all the order about that customer will be moved to an archive. You probably still want to keep it in the archive, but you will delete that afterward. Okay, and that's called cascade deletion. Okay. So this is kind of how you specify a table, including the definition of a primary key. This is another way to define primary key as a constraint. This is in Access how we define a table. It's not critical here. And by the way, in Access, increase the so-called, let's see where that is. In Access, the auto increment in my SQL Server is called auto number. Okay, auto increment is called auto number in Access. Okay, so that's auto number. Just be aware of it if you're familiar with that. Okay. And this is just some basic things which MySQL more or less follow it. There may be some exception. How you name variable and comment, we usually do this, but I believe you can use slash asterisk and then asterisk slash to enclose multiple line comment. Data type, in MySQL Server, there's many possible data type. If we come back to our database, just say class database, and let's just use course. Use the range so we see the table structure. Just click on it. If you drop it down, there's so many data type for you to choose from. Okay, and so we're not going to go over that. Okay, integer, small integer, datetime, data type, and bar chart is variable character. And I believe we could have, let's see, what do we have? It's all bar chart. I do not see, yeah, you can actually use CHAR, which is chart. Typically, when you have a really longer string, you use bar chart. But if it's a short string, maybe less than 10 character, you probably just use chart, CHAR directly. And we mentioned not now. Not now is a little bit tricky. Okay, not now. If a column is not now, then you must, when you create a new row, the not now column, you need to provide a value, which could be a blank string or 0 for numerical column. Okay, but you have to give it to it. If you did not specify, then the system will refuse to create that information, that row. If it's not now, but then you say with default, then when you insert a row without assigning a value to a not now column, which is a default value, then that column would have the default value. Okay, if it's just not now without the default, then when you try to insert when a particular column is not now and you did not provide a value for it, the system will refuse to do that insert. Okay, and give you an error message. Now we don't have to say now. By default, it's now. Which basically means that I don't know what's the value. And in MySQL Server, they actually use now in the result grid to show you that. Okay, now create some issue in terms of comparing two value of certain column or doing some calculation like an aggregate function. For instance, in the aggregate function, which we would talk about, when you have a null value, we ignore those rows when we apply aggregate function. Okay, and we do not count null value for certain column in the count aggregate function. There's math operation, logical comparison, logical expression, etc. that we can use in SQL. Primary key has to be unique, and it's not now. Okay, we talk about foreign key, and this is a data integrity rule. We mentioned cascade. Okay, cascade definitely makes sense, but there are other constraints which it's more advanced. We're not going to. You can study a little bit here. We're not going to elaborate too much on it. The system will also enforce integrity rule during insert, update, delete. Just to give you an example, let's say we have customer who place order, And so in the order table, we have a customer ID as a foreign key. So when you create an order and you assign a customer ID for that order, but if that customer ID doesn't exist in the customer table, that's a violation, okay, of this foreign key primary key pair, because you cannot have an order that has a customer that doesn't exist in your database, in your customer table, okay? And this is where that data integrity rule, or we call it referential integrity, are enforcing that referential integrity. Okay, this is how we define or alter our foreign key. It's a little bit more advanced. Don't worry too much about it. And this is structure our database. Here I use a different notation. The arrow just is like referencing. Okay, so for instance, division is a referencing table, and instructor is a reference table. And in this case, it's related to this director. It's a director of a division, which is played by an instructor in the instructor table. So once again, referencing table, reference table. Okay. And however, the div, which is a foreign key in the course table, course based on this particular foreign key, course is a referencing table, okay, and reference the division table. Okay. If we use the parent-child concept, division between this DID and the DIV, the division is a parent table and course is a child table. A division can have multiple courses. Between the division and instructor, this is a little bit unique. A division can have only one instructor serve as a director. By the way, here is a director. But an instructor can serve many division as a director. Doesn't happen a lot, but in our database, that happens, okay? Sometimes you chair more than one department. For small organizations, sometimes that happens. Okay, so in that case, it's one to many. So you have to really look at which relationship are you talking about, understand where there's a primary key, where serves a foreign key, understand the parent-child relationship, one-to-many relationship. Okay, then you're ready to go. Okay, we went over this, and this is just a very clear screenshot. Okay, and as advanced user, we can use RDBMS or tools such as like MySQL Workbench to directly work against the database. But a lot of end users are actually using application program through written in host language and to use underlying database. In that case, they don't really need to know much about the structure of the database. But for advanced user over here, when using like MySQL Workbench, going through the DBMS to work with the actual database schema, then you need to have really good understanding of the database schema, database structure, and the data model. Okay. And let's take a look of just, okay. We'll kind of wrap it up quickly here. Query and view. Okay. When you write a SQL statement, say select something, select some column from a particular table and show me the result. It's a query. Okay. You can write multiple query. You can write insert statement, create statement. Although create statement, insert statement is not considered query, they're data manipulation language to affect the actual data. Sometimes we use a term called CRUD, C-R-U-D, create, read, update, and delete. Re is equivalent of select in SQL. In SQL, re is select. Okay. Quad is just a common term that we use for transaction processing, create, read, update, and delete against some data. View in MySQL and most of the database, view just means if you save a SQL statement in your database, then that's a view. Okay, the SQL script, this can get a little bit complicated. Okay, let me just use, if you run this SQL statement, hold on a second, it doesn't work. Why? Because this is not the default database yet. Click on it, I get this. Okay. Then if I so that's a SQL select statement. It's a query. Okay, you can save it as a file. You can click the save, so you can just save it. You can just say this is test and name it SQL. Okay, you can close it. If you need it, you can just open it up. If you know where that is, where you save it. Let's say don't save. Okay, I think they override the statement that I have here earlier. Why don't we do something? Let's do this. Let's clear. Let's say close all. You can create a new SQL script in the SQL script editor. Now, if you either through this open or open SQL script file, that's what you have. Okay. If you run it, that's what you get. Okay. And then if I'm going to just say salary is less equal 60,000. If I run it, I'm going to get, I believe, only 3 rows. And then I can save this. I can save it under a different name. So you can just come to File and just say, let's see, save SQL script as, then you can name it differently. However, that's not part of the database. Okay, it's not part of your database. It's outside your database environment. If somehow I need this particular SQL select statement because I have some usage which people need to get access to employees' information for those whose salary is less than or equal to $60,000, then what I can do is to, I would say, create view, and I'm going to say, just say instructor. Let me just say 6K. $60K. Okay. I create a view, give it a name, and I can say us. Okay, just have a semicolon. So in this case, I'm creating a view. Okay, there's no view here yet. Just be aware, because I haven't run this. Now if I run this, okay, nothing happened. I do not see the result grid. However, view, it's not here. This is the case, you do need to refresh. Okay, and by the way, earlier, if you actually watch here, in the output area, they just say create view and 0 row affected, but it's done properly. Okay, it's not very readable, but you can get a sense when you got an arrow and what actually happened. They say 0 row affected, just it's not changing the underlying data. Okay, but you did create the view, so that's the view. Okay, so now I can just close this. So view in terms of interface, very much like the table. Okay, if I click here, they give me the create view statement. It's a little bit more elaborate version, but basically you can still see what we've done. Ignore like this part. It just create view, give it a name as this is our original select statement. So we pretty much have that. Okay. So once we have that, then we can just say you can also look at the data view. Okay, the table data view. Only 3 for all those whose salary is less than 60,000. And then what we can do is, now since I have the view, okay, I could, although we haven't formally introduced select, but you have seen it before, so I'm going to just use this. It's a little bit more advanced. For instance, I can just say I want to see only the I can come here. I can say, okay, my cursor is here. I can say last name, comma, first name, okay, and then run it. So no salary will be displayed, but the data I'm getting is from the view. Technically speaking, it's actually the data is based on the SQL select statement we define when we define the view. So we're not actually storing the result of that select statement which define the view. When you run some select statement against a view, we are using the definition of the select statement which define the view in formulating the SQL statement here. Okay, view is like a virtual table. There's no physical data we store associated with the view, but you can say select everything from the view, and you will get the other underlying data from the, in this case, from the instructor table. But with all the instructor whose salary is equal or less than $60,000. Okay, and we can do something. Let me just do something a little bit more advanced. I can say, okay, I will select this from here, and there's another. This is sorted, by the way. I forgot how we sort it, so I'll just say limit. 2. Okay, we got 3, but if I say 2, now I got 2 instructors' name. Let's look at so this is okay. Yeah, it's sorted in ascending order. Okay, I didn't say anything. Order by ascending order. That's sorting. When it's ascending order, which means over here, when I say limit 2, I believe these 2 instructors listed here are the one who get the least pay. Okay, the first person here is the one get the least pay. The second, Bruce, is actually second lowest to pay. We're not showing the salary, okay? And we can certainly add a salary. Sometimes we want to provide the privacy. We don't want to show that, but just to double check. Okay. And because the underlying SQL select statement has that order by which sort the data. So in this case, we are, it's still in effect. Okay, it's still in effect. If you want to change that, I believe we can do like say order by salary. Order by, let's see. Oh, I see. It has to, I'm going to change how it's sorted in descending order, highest to the lowest. So the limit 2, if practically give me the highest 2 employee whose salary is under 60K. Okay, under or equal to 60K. See that? So I can still resort. I can still sort it differently. Okay, although the view sorted in one way, I can change that. Okay, so technically, when you use a view, you can almost treat it as another table. We call it virtual table. Let me repeat that again. When you save, when you create a view, you are saving the definition of the view, not the underlying data. But you can treat the view almost like a table in your SQL statement, such as the from clause here, and then you can use it the way you want it. Okay. So I'm going to let's come back and to wrap it up. Okay. View is a little bit complicated, so we spend quite a bit of time explaining it. When we come back, we're going to formally start introducing SQL select statement one by one. You would use it for your assignment. For the database assignment, you pretty much will use the SQL select statement in most of the question. Okay, so I will sign off here. So I'll see you next time.